I'm on.
Alright, we're going to do a ceremonious clap anyway, just in case.
Cool.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 52. As you can see, we've swapped places. I promise it wasn't a body swap. We're still the same people. She's not in my skin. Not yet.
Ah! Stop! I felt like I was like sinking into the couch in the corner. So I asked Daniel, who has a taller torso than me, if we could swap because I felt like I was like being squished.
Yeah, it's okay. This is my normal seat around the house anyway. So,
which is hilarious because when it was at my Greer house, that was my seat that I would do homework in.
Was
whatever. So today, we kind of like. We've been doing are going to have like two main like separate topics. And when kind of talking about what we wanted to do today, we actually decided to do something that we don't normally do. Like we've referred to calls on previous episodes. We've talked about things that we could do better, but there was a hot ass mess call that I have run recently past. It's been a minute, but like if anything could go wrong, it did. And just
hold on, let me do my JD Vance look.
And just the combination of things, there was a lot in this call that encompasses stuff that we've talked about before. And I'm talking about like dinosaurs still in medicine who, don't keep up with active medicine. Working with not new basics, but like basics that want to do good and want to know what they can do better. Doing end of call reviews, imposter syndrome. Not gonna lie, this call bugged me, but talking about sleep deprivation, which after I got a nap, I felt much better about it.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Oh my God. And apparently listening to your husband.
Yes, listening to your husband helps a little bit too.
So, I'm sure everybody has run a call kind of like this, but we want to talk about the call, what happened, but also that not knowing the end of the call, I treated what was in front of me. So like what was actually wrong with her versus what I was seeing. We have to treat what we see and not feel torn up about it when we don't have a CT machine in the field. So we just feel like this one call kind of encompasses a lot of the topics that we have talked about, and we wanted to give you an example with like story time, if that makes sense. Do we just jump right into it?
Sure, let's go for it. They know all the normal intro stuff.
Okay.
Go follow us everywhere, especially on YouTube. Go join Discord. All the things.
Yeah.
Like and share. Tell your friends.
Facebook is starting to do some of the TikTok stuff, so we don't know if TikTok's going to stick around.
Yeah.
Just a conspiracy theory.
If you like all this stuff, make sure you're following on Facebook and YouTube, because YouTube is for videos. The OG. Anyway.
Long form content.
And short. They have shorts too. But anyway.
Well, yeah. But the long stuff. Anyways. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it. It's like 5:15 in the morning. I was called out to an 86-year-old female. What?
I hate running messy calls at that time of day. Like, I loathe it.
So, referring to the sleep deprivation, I will say, so during the day, decent day. I didn't take a nap, didn't need a nap, and then literally got my shit kicked in. I think I ran this was my 6th call after midnight. and I had already run like I think 3 before midnight, starting at like 8 p.m. 3 before midnight. So like we're talking sleep deprivation leading into this call. So 5:15, get called out for an 86-year-old female. It was called out as an unresponsive, and call notes just said possible gurgling. Okay. So get on scene. It was a nice house, ranch-style house. Walk in, and the floor was literally caving in multiple places. They had plywood that you had to walk over, and even as you stepped, it's like actively caving in. So
These are the things we have nightmares about.
I mean, yes. Like, I stepped, and I'm like, I'm literally going to die walking over this lady's floor. So it was down this skinny-ass hallway. I walk in, and she's laying on a bed. I think it was daughter. It was either daughter or granddaughter. I think it was granddaughter. She did not look old enough to be her daughter. She was there hysterical and just like, she's gurgling and won't wake up. And she was laid, like, if you're laying on the bed, her feet were, like, laid over the end of the bed. Like,
where the foot monster could get her.
I mean, basically, yes. Completely unresponsive, looked a little pale. I could hear gurgling. Okay, cool. I had all my equipment. I called the BLS crew because I had four bags with me, and I didn't have enough hands to grab suction. So I called them over the radio. I said, hey, bring in your suction. And I start doing all the things. Well, she was gurgling, and at first I couldn't feel a pulse, and I was like, fuck me. Fuck. No. So I checked her carotid. I was pushing too hard at first, but relaxed, slapped her on the pads. I would call her a peri-arrest. Her heart rate was like 38. Mm-hmm. And I could see black stuff coming out of her mouth. What?
Well, sorry, not to distract from your story. Just
no,
the term peri-arrest, because I first started hearing people say stuff like that when they would say pending cardiac arrest. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, our mutual instructor, whenever he would hear that, he'd be like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, technically everybody's pending cardiac arrest. Like, what the fuck are you even talking about? But it's just funny now that, like, now it's more common to say peri-arrest, or potential arrest.
I've heard pending
arrest.
83, yeah.
It's just funny that now it's normal, because we used to mock that shit so much. Anyways.
Well, she was actively going down the toilet. Yeah. Anyways, her oxygen was actually okay. It was like 90 on room air. She's breathing like 8 to 10 breaths a minute. Blood pressure was like 150 over 70 something. But looking at her pupils, they were about a 4 and completely unresponsive, but they were equal. So I was like, hypoxia. Okay, we got some neuro going on, but there's a problem. BLS crew gets on scene, starts suctioning. It's literal shit. Like, she has fecal matter coming out of her airway. There's a little bit of blood. It looks like coffee grounds. I'm like, cool. So we got, like, all the things wrong.
All the bodily fluids.
Yes. So we're going to put her on a backboard to get her out of the house, but with all of her vitals, like, in theory, being relatively stable except for the heart rate, I didn't want to lay her flat on her back to fight getting her out of the house for who knows how long. So I chose to do an intubation attempt. Well, there's too much shit. Her airway was swollen. I attempt. I'm like, no, can't do this. Suction more. And then another paramedic gets on scene. This paramedic is older. He will tell you that he's been in EMS for like 30-something years. So I look at him and I'm like, let's change providers. I can start an IV. Let's get her prepared to move. So he goes in and does an attempt. And when I tell you that he was fucking around in her airway for an obscene amount of time, like, I told him, here's suction. One of the EMTs is fantastic. He was helping suction at the same time. It was awful. It was brutal. It was rough.
Can we just pause for a second? And I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate what runs through our heads when we're handed that kind of a shit sandwich in the middle of, or at the end of a long shift after having the shit kicked out of you. Like, you can have two things true at the same time. Like, yes, we're all there, we're doing our job, we're engaged in providing patient care. Mm-hmm. But there's that moment for probably about 5 minutes where our brain is like, fuck this shit. Like, seriously, fuck this shit. And that sounds horrible to say, but again, as people who do this, we've done this over and over and over. We know, oh my God, this is what this call is about to fucking turn into. Well, as you'll see, it gets even worse. We hide behind the dark humor, but we don't actually address legitimately the frustrations that run through our heads. Not because it's anything that anybody did anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't care. You just, after a while, it becomes so commonplace that frustration just becomes a part of your existence. Mm-hmm. So I guess, I don't know, I feel like for transparency, especially for, anybody who's not in EMS, have some patience with some of these providers, because they may be exhausted. They may be fucking frustrated. And it's not that they don't care about taking care of your loved one. They just, in that moment, might be feeling a bunch of different things that you can't relate to because you don't do what they do. You're not engaged in the same things that they're engaged in. So I'm patient with people.
I'm not going to lie. Like, part of me is glad that it was a bad call, because when I had literally just laid down, I didn't even lay down in bed. I lay down on the couch. I was like, fuck this. I'm not getting in bed. Closed my eyes and tones dropped. So the rage that I felt going to this call, if it had been bullshit, I really cannot guarantee that I wouldn't have come unglued.
Y'all, people need to give us a little bit of credit. Those of us who do try to be professional on this call. It's not easy. It's not like it's totally fine. No, we're raging just like anybody else. We just have to fucking hide it.
Well, that, and it didn't help. Like, I understand the family family was hysterical, but like if I ask you like, hey, go in the other room and write down demographics, but you stand in the corner going, like, please get the fuck out.
And again, we understand that you're stressed out. You're dealing with this stuff. Like, again, it's not that we don't have compassion. It's just our brain has to shut down not shut down, but has to slip into work mode. It's no different than, say if you work at a grocery store and somebody goes and knocks over a couple cans of Alfredo sauce. That's literally the last thing you want to fucking deal with, because it's going to take forever. It's going to smell like shit. Like, it's going to
be sticky.
It's going to be awful, and you're just like, my God. But that's how normalized this stuff is for us. Like, not that we don't take human life seriously, and a lot of times we will have our feelings afterwards. But in the moment, that's the kind of like feeling that we have.
Well, and seeing her pupils, I knew that she was going to have a poor outcome, and it's like, we're going to do all this to Grandma, not in theory for nothing, but...
It's easy to feel defeated.
Yeah. So, I started an IV, and it was one of those that it flushed beautifully, but I couldn't draw back blood, or, like, it wouldn't draw back blood. And talking to the paramedic that was attempting the intubation attempt for the second time, I said, she doesn't have a gag, but when you try to advance the tube into the airway, her vocal cords were still clamping shut. So, like, no gag, but, still need RSI. I mean, still need RSI.
Think about it.
So, we had been able to pre-oxygenate and resuscitate her enough that her heart rate had come up a little bit. So, I just said, fuck it. We can't, yes, she needs an airway, but we were kind of in that middle balance of... sitting on scene and doing it was not going to help her, that she needed definitive care. So we went ahead and got the backboard. Well, it was, 86-year-old grandma who had every fucking breakable trinket in her fucking room possible. And the EMT crew, had to move the board around all of the furniture and shit in her room, and ended up breaking the light that was attached to the fan, the light bulb. Hey, at least it was the fan light bulb instead of, one of her probably, $1 million trinkets that she's been hoarding since, the 1930s. So, of course, that exploded. Everybody's covered in dust and glass, and we're stepping on shit, and the other...
Hope it's not an urn.
It wasn't. It was part of the fan. So, literally just kind of, everything was just what the fuck? We get her out to the truck, and I, said we're going to start RSI. There were 4 of us. I asked the other paramedic, I said, will you please start a line in her left arm? The other one wouldn't draw blood. It flushed beautifully, but there was just something in my gut that I was like, I don't know if I trust this, and I don't want anything else bad to happen. And... man, I'll throw a line in a hot ass second. I mean, Grandma had pretty good veins. Daniel, when I say this dude is like, let's tie the tourniquet.
What's that sloth from Zootopia?
Oh, yes. That's exactly what it felt like. One of the EMTs is like, do you just want to IO? He did. He goes, do you just want to IO? I was like, no, I don't want to do that to Grandma. And I knew that we had a 25...
I don't know.
But in theory, I had a potentially working IV, and if I had to fist fight the other paramedic to start an IV, I could have. So I just told the EMT, I said, baby, just start transporting. I am fine RSIing while we were transporting. We cannot fiddle fuck around while Grandpa tries to start an IV. So we start transporting. The female EMT that stayed in the back, she's bagging. We're trying to do all the things. We're suctioning because there's still shit coming out of her mouth. It's coming out of the NPA, all of the things. Well, her stats and her heart rate had come up. We were sitting okay. He starts the line and just kind of sits there. And I was like, okay, I'll draw up the drugs. I verified drugs twice with the EMT and with the paramedic. Not just the drug name, but also how much I'd drawn up. Push it. This lady did not have fasciculations with the sucks. I was very,
in light of what we found out after,
it makes sense.
Yeah.
So she did not have fasciculations after we gave sucks, but I waited an appropriate amount of time, went in, did the intubation. I washed through shit, vomit, blood, all the things. The tube passed through the cords. We had confirmation with lung sounds, chest rise and fall, all the things. Well, so we're rechecking all of our vitals, and the EMT in the back had the BVM attached to end tidal, attached to a filter attached to the ET tube. Now, I almost never use those filters, but they affect your ability to get the end tidal. It affects end tidal reading. We could not get an end tidal. So we decided we're going to take it off. Well, I had already secured the tube at this point, and the other paramedic literally just reaches over, grabs the thing, and pulls. He's not holding onto the tube. He's not doing anything. He just yanks that bitch right off. Well, so he detaches everything, including the plastic, like, not T-piece, but the plastic piece that goes in the ET tube.
Yeah, the connector to the VVM connector.
And it disappears. Like fucking, yeah, like it shoots and disappears. Me and the EMT are just staring at each other like, what the fuck just happened? And she's like, what do I do? And I was like, baby, I know it's going to be loose, but just put that end tidal piece back on the thing, try and hold it with your hand, and just give grandma something.
Just MacGyver that shit for a minute.
I mean, literally. So, like, I'm searching around her head, around the backboard, like, all of the things, and grandpa's, like, checking at the patient's feet. He's, like, moving the monitor to check behind it that's on the bench.
I believe the expression was throwing the monitor.
Well, I mean, yeah. He's literally looking everywhere. I'm like, I highly doubt it went there. Like, there's no way. So I do like a quick once over. I'm like, okay, just get another 6.0 tube, which is this. We had to size down because there's so much swelling in her airway. I was like, get a 6.0 tube, and we'll just take that piece off of it and all the rest of it because there's so much swelling. I was at that point, and I think everybody has been here at some point. Do you pull the tube and try to re-intubate with unbroken equipment, or do you try and fix it? And with the amount of shit still coming up her airway, I was kind of at that in-between. I was like, I don't want to pull the tube. Even though it's broken, I don't want to pull it. So I'm telling him, get another fucking tube. And he's just like, la-di-da. And I was like, give me the fucking... I mean, I didn't cuss at him, but I was like, just give me the intubation kit.
That internal voice was spicy.
Oh, listen, if faces could kill, the expressions between me and my EMT were unfucking real. Because he's like having a cow on the bench seat and she's in the CPR seat. We're just staring at each other. I was like, internally freaking the fuck out. I was like, I cannot pull into this ER with a broken ET tube, like trying to halfway do basically like passive ventilation. I was like, this cannot happen. We finally get the other tube, replace the piece, and connect everything, and her end-tidal shit.
She still had good sats all through it. I mean, y'all were giving her some good perfusion.
She stayed 95%. Her heart rate stayed in the 70s.
So it wasn't like she was just abandoned with, like, no fucking airway management.
Oh, no. I mean, she still had a tube. You make a very good point. She still had a tube. She was still getting oxygen. Stats stayed, like, 95, 96. Heart rate stayed in the 70s. It wasn't a good connection like it should have been. Afterwards, I re-visualized tubes in the airway. Like, I put the blade back in to look. Chest rise and fall. Oxygen was good. Clear breath sounds. 3 of us checked breath sounds. Pull into the ER, all the rest of it. Long story short, gave pass off. The doctor basically told me I was stupid. Apparently you can't be unresponsive and vomiting at the same time. I was like, She wasn't actively...
First time, doc?
Well, I was like, she's not actively retching, but okay. And then I told him why we RSI'd, and he's like, so if the cords are moving, she did have a gag. I was like, she didn't have a gag, but she still had a responsive, like, if you poke it, it got mad.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Just because you're unresponsive doesn't mean you're paralyzed. Your muscles still work even when you're unresponsive.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you breathe.
Long story short, they ended up having to replace the tube because apparently, what had happened is...
See, what happened was...
Well, I cannot place blame because I don't know exactly when it happened. It could have been when we passed off to the hospital and moved the patient. But basically, with the vocal cords, the tip of the tube was still in the airway, but the bulb was on the outside. And the doc said...
You do that motion again?
Stop it. The doc said it looked like it had been pulled through, which is why we had breath sounds, had good oxygenation, had chest rise and fall, but they did have to replace it, all the rest of it. I got a follow-up, and she had not only a bowel obstruction, she had a brainstem hemorrhage or bleed, as well as bilateral hemisphere bleeds. That was so bad she had a midline shift, like almost like a zigzag in multiple locations across her entire brain.
That I've never heard of.
And
like a zigzag shift like that.
Well, because I mean, if you have bleeding here, it's going to shift here, but if you have bleeding black here, it's going to shift here.
It makes sense. I just never heard of that, I don't think.
Yeah, like literally her entire brain just decided that it was going to hemorrhage on top of the bowel obstruction. When I got the follow-up, I was told there's multiple other words and complaints in here that I don't even know how to pronounce. And I was like, cool. So grandma's body just literally decided to give up, which makes sense why her pupils were non-reactive but equal. Is because literally her entire brain took a shit. So,
to put it in technical terms.
Right. So that's, I mean, obviously there's more stuff, there's more conversations, but when we come down to it, we've talked about like imposter syndrome, for example. I was sleep deprived.
Very, on top of having worked double shifts for how long now? Over a month?
5 weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Because I'm still out for another
week
and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, about a week and a half.
Yeah. So I've been doing a 24-24 schedule for 5 weeks at this point. And I just worked a 48 last weekend, I think. But anyways, so sleep deprivation is going to make problems and
emotions.
Feelings, yeah, all of the things more. And I already doubt myself sometimes. Like, not, oh, I can't do this job at all, but just like I second guess myself. Did I make the right decision? Should I have pulled the tube and replaced it? Like, going back and second guessing. So, imposter syndrome is something we've talked about. And when I left the shift, I talked to several different supervisors about the call. I talked to Daniel about the call. I had to go teach that day. I talked to one of my instructors who literally gave me my basic education. And everybody was basically like, there's literally nothing else you can do. Mm-hmm. There was nothing else you could have done differently. Like, yeah, the dislodged tube, the, cluster fuckery or whatever. But then when it came down to it, like doing the chart and everything, I, as much as I didn't want to, I took responsibility for that airway, even though I didn't pull apart the tube. And that was very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. Because I thought maybe it was an a hypoxic brain injury that was affecting her pupils. I had no idea that, the brain bleed was that bad. Yeah. But taking responsibility and being a leader on a call is so fucking hard. But it was my responsibility to make sure that everybody was doing what they should have. Now, after the call, the older paramedic, who's been in this field for 30 years, told me that he has never done an RSI before and is not normally comfortable doing intubation. And my answer to that was, like, my thing is that, yes, there's a certain level of we need to fake it until we make it in this field. Mm-hmm. Whether it's confidence, internally we have imposter syndrome and I'm like, I cannot do this, but you're going to do it anyways. But there's a certain level of, if you're not comfortable with it, you haven't done many intubations, and you sure as shit have never RSI'd, I need to know that ahead of time. Yeah. That is something that you should share.
Well, and because, I mean, but even with that, like, I'm a white cloud. So I don't run nearly as the frequency of shit. I still run some shit, but I don't run the frequency of shit. I haven't done that many RSIs in, 8, almost 9 years being a medic. Mm-hmm. I still know what needs to happen. Like, I'm not an idiot about it, and I can intubate like a motherfucker. But, like, that's one of those things where you should be, if you walk into that knowing, because usually when I do have to RSI, I will have a conversation with the other ALS provider on the call. Hey, I'm good, but, if you have more experience than with this, I will default to you because you have more experience. I will trust that. Regardless of whether I've been a paramedic longer, if you're good with that, cool. And it's not hard to have that conversation, but a lot of older providers don't. They don't want to admit it for whatever reason. They're insecure, they're arrogant, they're whatever.
But like when it comes to quote unquote dinosaurs in this field, you can't be slow as molasses in January, ironically, doing skills, especially when you have time sensitive emergencies. You shouldn't be taking 5 minutes to do an IV. It's like, slap that bitch on or tell me, swap me, or, admit that, hey, don't know about the vasculature, she's unresponsive, let's just do an IO. Like, there are so many tools that we have in our kit. We need to have that conversation and not be so arrogant that we can't admit when we're not comfortable or don't know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I didn't have an athlete conversation with him, so I don't know, which of it is. But, like, having to take responsibility was hard. And then hearing that was just like the icing on the cake of this call fucking sucked. And I was so worried when I thought it was a hypoxic brain injury. I was like, Grandma went without oxygen for X amount of time, you know, oh, I killed her. And it's like, well, no, her sats were good. You know, she was getting oxygen. It just wasn't a perfect connection. And in the end, it wasn't a hypoxic brain injury.
Well, and you and I have had this conversation a lot, especially once you first got your medic. And not sounding like I'm a pontiff on this stuff or arrogant or whatever. Just, you and I have had that conversation where I said, hey, you're not always going to be able to figure out what it is in the field.
Yeah.
You're not always going to be able to 100%, with 100% certainty, know what's going on every time. There's some times where you're just handed a shit sandwich and you're like, it could be 3 or 5 different things all at the same time and I don't even fucking know. And you can't beat yourself up over that shit. You can't. It's just not, you should, if you did not perform the skills appropriately, then yes, you should do some self-remediation. You should, you obviously take ownership of that, everything. And what you just described is what we have called rigorous accountability in action, which is, hey, I could sit here and I could point fingers, and it may be true. It may 100% be factually true. But what's going to benefit everybody involved? Me getting, my feelings hurt and pointing fingers and saying, well, you fucked up and you fucked up and you fucked up, so it made me look bad. Well, unfortunately, that's what most field QA is, well, you made me look bad and I'm mad about it. So instead, doing what you did, which is, all right, cool, like, we're just going to suck it up. We're going to factually describe what happened without making judgment calls about what people thought or didn't think or
because,
so
I mean,
forth.
Accidents do, don't get me wrong, accidents do happen.
You have bad days.
But I think it was just on top of the sleep deprivation. I was like, who doesn't hold on to a tube and just yanks? But that's beside the point. So
people who aren't experienced in intubation.
So when I talked to our QA clinical specialist lady, I asked, finding out, I said, I called in a neuro complication, but the concern was the airway. Basically, I said, should I have called a stroke alert? And she was like, literally no. There's no additional feedback that I could give you because you knew there was a neuro problem, but you called in what the complaint was. You don't have a CT. You don't know. You didn't know that it was a hemorrhage of all sides of the brain. Because I asked, I said, what could I have done better? And she's like, I mean, accidents like with the tube happen. She's like, but you fixed it. You pulled apart another tube and replaced the part. She was like, if you had to, maybe you just told me that you would replace the tube if you had to. And the EMTs expressed like that they were torn up about it at the end. So they went home, they took a nap, and then the next day, they called and wanted to do a call review because doing a call review immediately after a call like that was not going to help anybody. Not
at 6:30 in the morning at that point?
We didn't get back to our trucks or anything until 7:15.
Yeah.
So doing a call review immediately after was not going to help anybody, especially because I was pissed and upset. The other paramedic was trying to blame everything else. He tried to say the hospital dislodged the tube. It was a hot mess. It wasn't going to help anybody. So we talked about it. But my biggest question for Daniel, so I was torn up. I'm not gonna lie, I cried. I was emotional. I was pissed. I was doubting myself. I still doubt myself, but anyway, that's beside the point.
We're working on that.
I had to teach that day, so I didn't get a nap. I went home. I was working on the chart because I wanted the chart to be done by that evening, plus within the 24 hours. But I was talking to Daniel, and my question to him, which I think is a good conversation we're going to have now, is I was torn the fuck up about it. I was having anxiety about the chart, like didn't want to do the chart, didn't want to see it in writing that I sucked. I did take a mental health day the next day because it was supposed to be another 24/24. Why did I feel better working on the chart? Even though I hadn't taken a nap, so I was still sleep deprived. But working on the chart, seeing everything in writing, I was starting to feel better. Like, I even considered saying, hey, I'm not going to take a mental health day. I'll be in the next day.
Yeah, I told her, fuck off. And so did the lieutenant.
I would say, so did my supervisor. She said, nope. But why even sleep deprived did I feel better? Like, that's just the most wild thing, because it solidified it in writing.
Yeah. And I'm sure some people are going to have a bitch fit about this, but fuck off, I don't care. The number one way to process and deal with anxiety in your life is through action. So whatever the thing is you're anxious about, start taking some action about it. And so whether that's money, whether it's something related to your family, to relationships, to whatever it is, your career, take some action about it. If you feel insecure about something, take some action to fix that insecurity and build a body of proof against it, rather than let it fester and let it grow and spiral out of control. So in this situation, it's very easy to exaggerate the feelings and the time perception and everything else involved in this call. But when you actually start sitting down, putting the timeline together, actually getting your thoughts out of your head onto paper, dealing with the facts of it, well, not on paper in this case, but figuratively speaking, you're in effect taking action and saying, okay, well, I have these feelings about it. I have these just general scattered thoughts, but let me bring it all together and actually address factually what the repercussions of this, what was the factual timeline, the factual series of events. And when you do that, even in a sleep-deprived state, which sleep deprivation makes emotions 10 times worse, it gives you a little bit of peace of mind, because you can factually address your fears and say, okay, well, this actually didn't go as bad as I thought. Or, okay, it makes more sense now why I did what I did, because I'm putting out there exactly what the things were that I found, what my pertinent negatives were, what the timing was, all of it. So to me, that's what a lot of that boils down to.
Well, and looking at it, because I'm pretty good about keeping an eye on my times and everything. So being able to work back and put everything in the activity log, our entire scene time with all that clusterfuckery was only like 18 minutes total once everybody got on scene.
And mind you, at that point there wasn't any for sure, stroke alert indication that would, cut the scene time down some. But still, that's a pretty good scene time for that complex of a patient.
Well, I was also in scene by myself for 5 minutes before anybody showed up. So that the 18 minutes is from the time that I got on scene to leaving. And that also included extricating the patient from the house. So
the scene time with the transport truck on scene was what, like 13 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
So I mean, you really can't argue with that.
No, and seeing like how long it took and the sequence of events with RSI, like taking the complete emotion out of it, I think is what helped me. Also, knowing the patient's outcome. Because even seeing everything in writing, I was like, still, I don't know, that the ET connection sucked, blah, blah, blah. But then I had to keep telling myself, but there was chest rise and fall. It doesn't matter if it got dislodged, there was chest rise and fall. Because even the doc at bedside confirmed there was chest rise and fall. Where the problem came is when they had the vent pressure with RT that they knew something was wrong with the tube. Because you had the chest rise and fall, good oxygen, all the things. So, I know that's a lot of words, but I feel like this call, it fell to shit. It kind of embodied a lot of what we talk about with imposter syndrome. Knowing clinically, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I made the right decisions, even supported by the hospital, by QA, by all these people. But I still feel like I shouldn't be in charge of anybody. Doing end of shift call reviews is beneficial, not just for the paramedic, but for the crew that you're with. If you're a dinosaur, keep up with medicine or get the fuck out. If you don't know what you're doing, there's a certain level of fake it till you make it that's okay. But if you don't know what you're doing or you've never done something, you need to say it. Don't fucking fake it and then at the end of the shit sandwich be like, I didn't actually know. Good for you.
Well, and two, this is where, over time in your career, you will have, whether you're an EMT or a paramedic, you're going to have calls like this.
Yeah.
You're going to have calls that knock you on your ass, that just break your brain, or even if they're not complex, they're just like, what the fuck's happening? Like, I'm so confused as to what could possibly be going on here. And there's two ways that you can react to that. You can have an egotistical blame-shifting mentality, which all that's going to do is prevent you from having an honest, transparent look at yourself and your own actions, because you're so busy defending your actions as if they were perfect and placing the blame on everybody else, and you're never going to actually learn from that. Whereas if you take the humbling approach and say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of shit that I can't know ahead of time. What are things that I could have learned through this that I can take away from this? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're just handed a shit call that even the doctors would be like, bro, I wouldn't have known what to do either. I've had that plenty of times. So that I believe that creates a level of humility that is what allows people to have longer, more healthy careers. When you have that humility, you're not wrapped around the axle of being perfect and knowing everything and figuring out everything. You're going to take a deep breath. You're going to be more deliberate in how you treat your patients, and you're going to be patient. And I think that's the secret, I guess, to improving through these kinds of calls.
Well, and as protocols advance and, we can do all this cool shit, we need to know that sometimes all you can do is ABCs. Or, I guess, XABCs. I couldn't stop the shit coming out of her, esophagus.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, outside of the RSI drugs, I didn't give her anything. Her pressure was fine. There was, at that point, she needed oxygen and airway control. And I feel like sometimes we get so focused in on, there's like 50 things that I can fix. But if you don't know the cause, sometimes all you can do is do the ABCs. That's why we have docs. And guess what? The ED doc literally looks at her and goes, fuck if I know. And then come to find out, neurosurgery had to consult, and they basically said that her brain took a shit and that there was no surgical intervention from her. Family did withdraw care. They said to give her a natural death, AND. Because there was no intervention. There's no way for us to know that.
Well, and when the physicians, who each one of them is making about 4 times your salary, say they have no fucking idea and they can't do anything, guess what? There's really nothing you could have done either. So, you're doing the best you can with what you know and what you're given, and that's all that can be expected of you.
So I know that was a lot, and I'm sure plenty of people have probably run shit show calls, but we just thought that this one kind of embodied a lot of the principles that we talk about, and it's the first call in a hot minute that just had me absolutely tore up. So don't let imposter syndrome win, and continue learning.
So the next thing we want to talk about, which was our original main topic, and kind of what what created the title of the episode, but should you die?
Can I say what it stemmed from?
Go for it.
So I was at shift change one day, and the paramedic that I was relieving was, I honestly can't even tell you if it was call, if it had something to do with weather or whatever, but he was telling me about a conversation that he had with one of the BLS crews, and it had to do with scene safety. And they said something along the lines of, well, it's too dangerous, for us to be doing, I think it had to do with driving. It might have been driving over the ice. This is too dangerous. What if we die?
Were they not to stage for a call.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, it was staging for a call.
We don't want to die for this job or whatever. And the paramedic, who career firefighter, career paramedic, all the things, told me, and I think he said this to the providers, and he said, you signed up basically to die, like, for the job.
Yeah,
like for the patient, excuse me. You sign up for the potential to die while on the clock is basically what it came down to. And we just kind of wanted to talk about that mindset, because there's a lot packed into it.
I mean, I've heard that line a good bit, and more from the fire side than from EMS, but it's the whole, you signed up to put your life on the line mentality. And my counter to that is, just because your life could be put on the line, just because you're in situations where it's more likely that you can be in danger, which EMS does, that doesn't mean that's like, your sledgehammer answer to everything. You should still use discretion. You should still be circumspect in what you're doing and why you're doing it, because even the military, who we all can agree, they literally sign up to die for our country. Even they have rules of engagement and protocols to minimize death. So that doesn't mean it never happens. It doesn't mean they never have to jump in front of the bullet for somebody. Or they never have to take exceptional above and beyond risks.
But here's the thing. Even then, there's nothing in their contracts or anything that says you're required to jump in front of a bullet for somebody else. Whether it's a civilian or a teammate. It comes down to personal decision.
Well, and that's why we have Purple Hearts. It's for people who went above and beyond. Well, in Purple Hearts and Medal of Honor, there's a couple of different ones
there's
related
a few
to bravery.
Different ones. Yeah, depending on the situation.
Yeah, so it's basically, in those situations, it's for those who went above and beyond. Well, above and beyond what? And that is what I would say is, in our context, a professional standard. People who went above that. Yeah, of risk. A professional standard of risk. They went above that to do something exceptional and amazing.
So, like, when we're talking about that, it's like, yes, going on to a scene by yourself for any call. It doesn't matter what the complaint is. There's always a risk of having a psych patient or whatever. The 2 times that I had a gun pulled on me, that was not anticipated.
Yeah.
one of the times law enforcement was on scene. So there's an inherent risk that we have with our job, but another thing, if you know that there's a gunman on scene that's threatening people, that has hostages, it's like us running in and saying, shoot me instead. There's nothing professional that says we are required to do that. I am not purposefully signing up to do my job to say, yes, please kill me instead of my patient.
Well, and what are we taught from day one of EMT school as far as scene safety, period? Your personal safety is first priority. Your partner or partners is second. And your patient is third. Like, they're at on the lower end of that totem pole. That doesn't mean you don't care about the safety of your patient. But at the end of the day, especially if your patient's going to be threatening, you walk away. Period. Or if you're in a situation where there's potential danger. Okay, so let's use like a hostage situation, for example, or just a domestic violence situation. You don't know whether or not someone is potentially armed going into that situation. And yes, I understand there's some EMS agencies that carry bulletproof vests, but it's not a universal standard.
It doesn't protect your head.
Doesn't protect your head, doesn't protect your nuts, doesn't protect anything else. You know, it hits the core stuff. So you run the risk of going in there and aggravating the situation and not actually being able to neutralize the threat effectively, and potentially not only putting more people at risk, but jeopardizing yourself and your partner and preventing you from being able to help not only the people there, but the rest of the people on your shift, the rest of the people in your fucking career if you get killed.
Well, and how many times have we been told a dead or injured provider is just adding additional patients to a situation?
Yes. You're distracting resources. If you go in there and do something stupid or seemingly heroic, even if it is like objectively heroic, yes, but then suddenly you're putting yourself at risk of death or injury and taking away resources from the people who originally needed help to begin with.
Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions. I think we've shared my car fire down in the valley call. And it's kind of one of those things, there are times where sometimes we react without thinking. And like stepping back, I could sit here and say, oh hell no, I should have never gone down there. But like the thoughts running through my head of why is there was a bystander already holding the patient kind of away from the fire. Yes, within blast distance, but like there. So thought process, let's go down there and get the patient out and we're good, but inherently dangerous. So like you're going to have situations like that where maybe you can reason in the heat of the moment and then after the call step back, you'd be like, fuck, I should have done that.
Or, I mean, if you want to, and this is where I draw the line between there's a professional standard versus your personal conviction. If you feel compelled to do something and potentially risk your life, I mean, like I said, I don't believe that it's smart to potentially take away resources from the original emergency. But at the end of the day, I am also very much a proponent of, of autonomy, and you are free to make stupid choices or reckless choices or heroic choices, whatever you want. You're free to do that. But that doesn't mean you need to impose that on everybody else and drive a wedge between you and other people. That's just not right. So if you do something that truly only, I mean, none of it really only affects you because someone's going to have to come and get you too. If you run into, and I've had friends who were in this situation before where they were able to get on scene to a house fire before fire and they could see and hear someone inside, but they could not get to them and they were not fire personnel. They did not have any equipment, none at all. And they literally had to sit there and listen to the person die. Because what happens if they try to go in there? You're going to suddenly end up with 2 patients and most likely 2 dead people.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to anybody's family.
No.
You're already going to most likely have a loss. Don't add to it.
Well, and there was one service that we collectively worked for that basically this county was so short-staffed on law enforcement as a whole. I'm sure that's probably true across the nation, but just for this area that I'm talking about, law enforcement wasn't able to, not because they didn't want to, but they weren't able to have the staff to come to all situations. So based on call notes, scene location, all the rest of it, they had a 2 yes, 1 no rule. So basically, the partnership had to say, both partners had to agree, yes, we will go into the scene. It sounds safe, maybe sketchy, but sounds safe. But it took one person to say no, and they would not go into the scene. Now, there was another county that we worked for that basically, if anything sounded sketchy, you were told to stage. And there was one call that I was working that basically it sounded like a dementia guy thought his wife was like an intruder, and he was like trying to beat down the bathroom door with an axe. But
it's like The Shining all over again.
I mean, yes, with an axe. And they said, hey, stage, law enforcement's en route, could be like 30 minutes, or it was something like that. Well, both of us had come from said previous service, so we looked at each other, we're like, dementia grandpa's going to see EMS, we're going to be there, we're pretty confident that we can talk him down. So we got closer to the scene. Law enforcement actually ended up still beating us on scene. They fucking reported us for going on scene and not staging. And they were like, it was dangerous. But here's the thing. Law enforcement agitated that patient worse. And he didn't calm down until he saw us. Which is why, again, medically, the two of us had said yes. Well, so different counties might have different rules based on scene safety as well. So I guess it also kind of depends on who you work for.
Well, but I think we beg the question, who's the best trained or equipped people to handle whatever the danger in front of you is? If it's a potentially violent situation where maybe there's a gun on scene. I'm sorry, if there's a gun on scene or weapons, if it's verified there are weapons on scene, you are being reckless to go into that scene without any backup, at least going in simultaneously with you. Mm-hmm. Stay the fuck away, because I guarantee most of y'all aren't trained how to actually fight.
Well, but
it's not smart. You're not prepared for that. Mm-hmm. You might feel like it. You're like, oh yeah, I can deal with this shit. No, the fuck you can't.
I can dodge a bullet.
Yeah, bullshit you can.
Well, and I feel like, too, there's no, like, blanket statement that we can say about scene safety. Because, like, with dementia grandpa with an axe, law enforcement agitated him. But we knew dementia, medically speaking, how to distract, have that conversation. So, like, yes, dangerous scene, technically there's a weapon. But now, obviously, with a gun. But here's the thing. Although law enforcement, in a lot of ways, is more equipped, they also have rules of engagement when it comes to school shooter situations. They're not supposed to go in by themselves. Like, if the resource officer decides that he's going to go, do heroic measures and go see if they can find this shooter, that is a personal decision. Mm-hmm. Think about our PHTLS, TECC, any school shooter training. You're not supposed to go in solo.
And I hear a lot of people, there's the typical exceptions that people make. It's like, oh, well, no, I wouldn't do this except for, except if it's, there's children involved, which I understand. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
I would do some soul-damning things.
Yeah,
truly soul-damning, like Netflix documentary-worthy things for my kids or anyone else's kids. But you still also need to check yourself and ask yourself, first of all, how many times are dispatch notes incorrect? Either direction, either understating or overstating the problem.
Yeah.
So you could potentially walk into a situation that wasn't actually as bad as it sounded, make it worse, and potentially cause harm to those kids that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Mm-hmm. So you run the risk of that happening. Mm-hmm. But also, what about your own fucking kids? What about your own fucking family? And I understand that people, I don't have any family. Fuck off. Like, if that's gonna be your excuse, your rebuttal to this, like, go grow up. You're still a life. You're still someone. We sat down and tried to calculate how many possible patients that you and I have each encountered in our career, and we're talking thousands.
No, I think EKGs alone we were over 7,000. So
we're
like tens of thousands of patients already in our careers, and then however long we stay in the field practicing, etc. Even additional patients, and the rate of paramedics coming to the field has dropped off a lot. So, like, in general, the death of anybody is never good for patients or your family. And if you don't have family, fine. Friends, coworkers, somebody cares about you. Maybe it's your fucking dog that cares about you. Just saying. Or a cat.
Yeah.
Another, not even age, but another, like, category of exceptions that we hear a lot is women. That anybody would go in, to some dangerous situation for a woman. And I don't know if it's like this old school, like, knight in shining armor. Chivalry, damsel in distress. Fuck off. Why? Well, but I mean, seriously, why are we saying that women are more important than men? And, like, I've heard it too where it's like, if it's pregnant person, pregnant woman, it's not just, we're not getting into that.
I'm with you.
Pregnant woman, then it's not just the woman's life, it's the baby's life, which inherently I do agree we're talking about a child, but, like, there seems to be, like, extra importance placed on a female being in a dangerous situation. And this whole, like, weak mentality, I don't understand. Because women, regardless of the difference in body composition and strength and everything, women have legs. Women are capable of talking their way out. Of course, you got the mouthy ones that might make a situation worse.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a dangerous situation, I don't expect a male or female, anybody, to come in and rescue me just because I have boobs. Or I have childbearing capabilities. Like, sure, you have in vitro, IVF, whatever. So, in theory, you don't need the man to reproduce. But, like, what is it that we're putting extra emphasis on being a female? Like, that one gender should not be more important than the other. Men are just as important as women.
You heard it from her.
Well, I just don't fucking understand why everybody's like, oh, I do some sketchy shit, not just for children, but women. It's like, fucking why?
Yeah. And
why?
I mean, I understand the heroic old school, like the Titanic women and children first thing. Like, okay, there's a certain amount that is romanticized. And I'm not saying, like, fuck women, fuck kids. No.
But I'm just saying, why men versus women are women more important? Because, yes, children need moms, but children need dads. Like, it...
Yeah, and I mean, and there's people that go back and make the evolutionary argument that, for millions of years, men were the protectors and the women were the protected, the child bearers. They were protected because they were essential to the perpetuation of society. Okay, I get that. But we have a lot of equalizers in our society today. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean there aren't differences between men and women. But as far as personal safety, continuation of the human race, however you want to go with it, we have a lot of equalizers now to where that's on its own not a valid argument for this situation that we're talking about right here.
Well, and I want to put out there, is statistically is underreported, but women are just as often abusers and aggressors as men, if not more often. But it's underreported.
Yeah.
So, like, when going into a potentially dangerous scene, like, there may be an already preconceived notion that the male is the aggressor when actually it's reversed. And it's like, oh, we're going to go in and save the female. Your back is to her thinking that you're protecting her, and then she stabs you in the back or, like, some crazy shit. Like, the whole woman versus man thing when it comes to exceptions, I just don't understand.
And I also understand the exception, too, for family members in general. And I can understand this, especially off-duty. Let me clarify that a little bit. But, like, because off-duty, sure, fuck it. I'm going to do what I need to do to keep my family safe. Mm-hmm. Like, we've had that conversation plenty. And it's not because, I think you're weak or whatever. No, I accept that as my primary role in a family unit. Mm-hmm. One of my primary responsibilities, that is not my sole responsibility. I'm not the one who solely has this responsibility, but I personally claim responsibility for keeping my entire family safe. And sometimes that means coordinating with you to handle the literal logistics of that, but I claim that responsibility. But that's not coming from a place of, wanting hero status. Mm-hmm. That's the way life works. Mm-hmm. And people claim exceptions for elderly population too. And again, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer for this. But if you're going to endanger anybody intentionally, it should be you and not the person who's working with you. Don't drag your partner into something and guilt trip them for trying to think of their family first, trying to think of their safety. Don't guilt trip them into that. That's not right. That's manipulative, and that's fucking bullshit. Because I've heard those motherfuckers too. Like, fuck you. No, don't do that to me.
You should be making a personal choice, not a choice for the whole group. Now, I will say there are exceptions, like when talking about the elderly and stuff like that. Let's take, the Queen of England. Now, I mean, granted, she's passed, but any important, like, royal or, like, the president,
Nancy
and then
Pelosi.
you have... Stop. You have the president, and then you have, like, the Secret Service. But here's the thing. Not everybody in the Secret Service is personally responsible for protecting the president. You have different details.
Correct.
But you also choose it. Like, just because you're with law enforcement doesn't mean you are committing to, I'm going to sacrifice myself.
Well, and specifically for Secret Service, it is in their job description that they are to stand between the president and any threat physically.
But again, they choose it personally. It's not forced upon them.
Agreed, but I'm just saying that is actually in their job description. That is nowhere in my job description at the fuck all.
No.
So, no, we're not advocating being chickens. We're saying use some discretion and be willing to do an assessment of what's simply risky versus what's reckless. Mm-hmm. Because, let's face it, our job is inherently dangerous and risky. Mm-hmm. We are going to be in situations that are unpredictable, that with zero planning. You've had maybe, anywhere from 5 to 15, 20 minutes to prepare for this call by the time you get on scene. And you have no idea what all the shit's going to happen. And so that's why we need a professional standard for scene safety, for personal safety, and we should adhere to that, barring, very extenuating circumstances.
Yeah. And I know we mentioned, who's most, who's most prepared for dealing with situations. And
best trained, best equipped.
Pick your wording. And it's really, like we talked about, it's going to depend on situation. Law enforcement, in theory, is better equipped. They're supposed to have training on de-escalation instead of escalating situations. But there are just some patients, like dementia grandpa with the axe, that law enforcement might actually agitate the patient if it's a medical complaint. But although although fire and EMS do a lot of medical calls together, when it comes to like a house fire with a patient inside, I am nowhere near equipped to do literally anything. I can provide care once the patient's out, but I have no equipment to go into that, so, like, fire is equipped for that. Now, when it comes to law enforcement and EMS or law enforcement fire or whatever, I think it's situation dependent, because not that, yes, you have the bad law enforcement officers just like you have bad EMS and fire, but you just have some patients that get more worked up when they see law enforcement just because of the uniform.
Yeah.
Like, not even because of the person personally, but just because of the uniform. So it's all situation dependent, and that's why we're taught scene safety and how to assess and read body. Honestly, I think more body language. Like, I know you're supposed to take psychology for most courses and stuff, but I think it would be really cool to do like advanced pathophysiology and then like body language reading.
Well, and there's so many resources available for it that are free, or just the cost of a book.
Yeah.
But I think too, I think it's an important distinction, training versus equipment. Because I'm trained to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
If I don't have the equipment to do it, I can't fucking do it. Like, as a paramedic, if I'm at home, I don't have all the shit available to be able to treat my family the way I would if I was at work.
Yeah. What is a paramedic with no equipment?
A first responder.
Yeah.
Barely.
Yeah.
Barely. So, and the same thing for cops. Like, if cop doesn't have his vest and gun and all the other, non-lethal options, he's just a regular dude. Same thing with firefighters. And you could be a firefighter who is functioning as a paramedic for the day on like an EMS only service. First of all, your, employer's insurance won't cover you going into these situations. But that aside, you're not equipped to go into a burning building if you don't have all your shit with you. And like, there's been this long-standing kind of ethos about, these tough firefighters that will go in without gear, and that's how they used to do things. Yeah, and that's how they died from fucking cancer. You should take reasonable precautions to mitigate as much loss as possible.
I think this is a slight sidestep, but it's so funny that you bring that up, because even nowadays, I think every fire department that I've been in, they have like posters posted up about like, what are your risks of cancer related to like smoke inhalation and this and that, all the rest of it. And I think every single fire that I have been on recently, you have at least that one person that is still standing there getting smoke wafted in the face with a hose, not internal, it's still, external, but still in there doing things with like maybe turnout pants. Some of these guys show up just in jeans and t-shirts. I'm like, that's cool and all, but like no protection. And it's like, okay, you're no longer taking a general job risk at that point. You're being reckless because you know the cause of cancer. And I
Yep.
think, well, but here's the thing, too. I feel like that's true with the medical field. I think we've shared before. There was one job that I had that the respiratory therapists, all of them smoked. And yet they're still sitting here telling patients, you shouldn't be smoking. It's like, bro, you smell like an ashtray. It's like, I feel like with public service, I mean, how many of us eat like shit, are overweight, have COPD, don't use our CPAPs at night, still smoke, all the rest of it. Then we're sitting here telling patients, why are you calling 911 for this when you should be doing blah, blah, blah. It's like, bro, you're not doing it.
You're not far off from being like them.
Well, so, I mean, there's an inherent risk, health. We know the risks of smoking, yet so many of us still do it. And then we give our COPD patients shit for having COPD and still smoking. It's like, bro. Yeah. You probably have COPD, it's just not diagnosed yet.
And this whole attitude of recklessly disregarding safety procedures for hero status, it's not smart and it's not responsible. And I can't tell you how many times I have heard it. And I'm not picking on firefighters. It's just more naturally part of what they do, because just about every aspect of their job is a risk. Yeah. Every kind of call they can run on is a much higher risk than the average EMS calls. We may run way more EMS calls. So overall, we still have a total of more dangerous calls than they do. But of their total call volume, their stuff is significantly more dangerous than ours. So that's an understanding. But where I was going is, I hear it all the time. This, I would put my life on the line for anybody. That's just the job. And it's this self-righteous, I'm sorry, I don't have patience for this. I understand that there's people who genuinely believe that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with expressing that. But we all know the difference between someone who genuinely is passionate about the job versus someone who's a t-shirt firefighter. Mm-hmm. And this whole, I fight what you fear. Stop it. Stop it. You're going to get people killed. Dead providers don't save people. Dead firefighters don't save people. Dead cops don't save fucking people.
I think probably one of the most common calls that we run that we don't take the risk seriously is traffic accidents. Mm-hmm. Especially on, I can't even say especially on highways, because even the small, windy, blind curve, mountain roads are probably just as dangerous, especially the way some people drive. And no, I'm not the best at wearing my traffic vest on every fucking call. But in general... Yes,
boss, we wear our traffic vests on every call on the main roads.
Wink, wink. Granted, Daniel got caught in a fucking picture not wearing traffic vest.
Literally, that was the fourth or fifth MVA I'd been on that day. I'd worn my vest on every single one. And this is just the one that I was called for backup by my supervisor, which never happened. So I was like, this is not good. So, of course, I get there and I'm booking it to get to the ambulance.
They were already in the ambulance. Daniel literally was walking between the cars and...
Well, the picture that was...
You were on the shoulder.
Well, no, because I had gone in the ambulance and the supervisor asked me, hey, can you go to my vehicle and get blah, blah, blah. So I was coming back from getting his stuff.
Yeah.
But his vehicle was on the other side of the ambulance from mine, so I wasn't going to backtrack to mine and then go that way. So anyway, I got a picture. The supervisor, jokingly told me, hey, make sure you wear your traffic vest next time. I'm like, yes, sir.
But anyways, I feel like we just so naturally go into these calls and don't take into consideration, even if law enforcement or fire has all but one lane shut down or whatever, people are stupid. I mean, how many times have people run through traffic lights and hit the fire truck or the ambulance that's trying to protect a scene? You got stupids no matter what. And traffic accidents are probably some of the most, potentially risky, dangerous, pick a word, that we do that 9 times out of 10 we just don't think about. These vehicles are protecting the scene. I'm not going to get run over.
I can't tell you how many times I've either been on calls and had fire trucks or ambulances get struck by another vehicle. How many near misses I have had on scenes, almost getting run over. How many people I know who have been clipped by cars have literally had their safety vest snagged off of them. Thankfully they didn't get hurt, but it was that fucking close. So, yes, our job is inherently risky. We're inherently doing things that the average person doesn't do and shouldn't do. Average person shouldn't walk out into, the interstate no matter what's blocked off. Unless they're working and all that stuff. But, but don't do this, vain hero complex shit. Nobody gives a damn. Like it doesn't do anybody any good. And I think that glorifying that as like our default like trump card for any situation, it's just not right. It's not healthy.
I do want to throw out, I don't know this factually, but I would think on like a payout insurance side of things, if you take an unnecessary risk, I can't imagine that your job or workers' comp is going to want to pay out for a workplace injury when you purposefully took a risk that you didn't have to. I don't know for sure. That would be...
I mean, workman's comp is going to fight that. I've seen that happen. Workman's comp will fight that shit. Not that money is the be all end all. I know you're not saying that. Just I can hear the trolls. I can hear the hero complex people bitching, but
it's not about the money.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It is. If you get hurt because you took an unnecessary risk and then you're out of work because you got hurt and can't work, I mean, then you're fucking not just yourself, but also your family that you're no longer providing for. And if you turn around on workers' comp and try and work another job and they find out, it's still lost money because they'll say, well, fuck you, you don't need time off, and your job is not protected. So like taking unnecessary risks, there's so many facets to it. I don't know why a lot of people have made it their personality. Yes, our job is risky, but going above and beyond, like there's a time and a place where personally, if you decide to go above and beyond for a child, what the fuck ever, like that's fine. That's a personal decision. You cannot enforce that on your partner. But also understand you're affecting future patients. And if you're on workers' comp or anything else, it could fuck up your future for your family. So it's not. It's literally not even just about you. In any situation, it's also what do you want your legacy to be to your family?
Well, and also, too, with life insurance.
Yeah.
Unless you have something like the Armed Forces Benefits Association life insurance, AFBA, which... literally the only way it will not pay out life insurance is if you commit suicide. That is the only situation in which they will not pay out. If you die anyway, through any means, anywhere in the fucking world, you get a payout. And your family gets a payout. So unless you have something like that, you could saddle your family with a horrible, horrible future by getting yourself killed unnecessarily.
Well, and I can hear it now that people are going to want to bring up 9/11 and the amount of service deaths and everything.
Which is the reason that AFBA was opened up to first responders. 9/11 was the reason that was opened up to us.
Yes. But here's the thing. In a situation like that, it was still up to staff to make that decision for themselves. It is not something that was expected. It kind of like with Bomb Squad. Yes, Bomb Squad willingly goes in to, mess with bombs and all the rest of it. But what do? They have policies and procedures. They have protective equipment. It is not assumed that they're going to go to work that day and die.
Yeah. Well, and in that situation, too, with 9/11, it's an extreme circumstance, number one.
That's not normal.
Number two, you still have those guys still geared up. They still communicated. They were put in extraordinary circumstances. And they still did what they were supposed to do. Yes, that situation is inherently risky. There is no avoiding that. And that is their job. So it's not that you're never going to be in a situation, or that you shouldn't ever be in a situation where your life is at risk. It's the question of, and that's ultimately what we're getting to with this, is exercising wisdom and some forethought into when it's appropriate and when it's not.
And with 9/11, they went into an even riskier situation. But like you said, they communicated and they still had times where they go in and then they pulled out from the building. They did not advance. So there's still, even in the extraordinary situations, there's still policy and procedure that they follow to try to minimize loss of life.
Yeah.
We did not sign up to say, I'm going into work today and I'm possibly going to die.
Yeah.
The loss of life within public service or even military as a whole, the purpose of it is to be minimalized. Yes, it might happen at some point, but they don't want, I mean, honestly, some people that do risky behavior, even if they come out unscathed, will actually get in trouble for it. Because, like, this was unnecessary.
Yeah. Again, the whole point of this is not to provide an ultimatum. The whole point of this conversation is to engage conversation, to engage thinking about it, because this is not a simple conversation.
No.
This is a complex conversation, and as we've seen on TikTok, literally no one had the exact same answer.
No.
Everybody had different answers about this, and that's kind of the point. But like with anything else, what we're encouraging is some wisdom, some forethought, and to be responsible, because you are a professional functioning on the job. You should behave professionally, and you need to think in the long run of your career and how many people you can potentially help, not just the people in front of you right now. Yes, that's important, but you all need to have the full perspective of your life, the meaning of your life, the meaning of your career, and all of this.
And I just want to add, kind of like with the conversation that led us into this, just because you might have the idea of, oh, I sign up to die on the job, you cannot force that thought process or dangerous situations on other people. If you want to take some inherent additional risks, that is a decision for you.
Yeah.
Someone else is not going to put me in a bad situation when I'm going to come home to my husband and children.
So, that was heavy.
Yeah,
was a lot.
Honestly, both topics.
Yeah. So, anything else we want to throw in before we say goodbye to everybody?
I don't think so. I mean, I could always recap, don't let imposter syndrome win, but
don't be an idiot.
Yeah, don't be an idiot.
Think about don't just think about the patient above yourself, think about your family above yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's not just about you.
Yep. Novel idea.
Right. I do want to say, kind of to sum everything up, because with the end of call reviews, but also with the paramedic saying he would die versus talking to the BLS crew, we need to support our basics. I know we talk about that a lot, but we do. With the end of call reviews, if there's something they could have done better, like my only feedback for my crew was, hey, don't put the filter on when we have an intubated patient. It fluff them up. Like, obviously don't give them a big head, like, arrogant ego, but, like, y'all were not rushing me.
Mm-hmm.
We had good communication. If the basics are 18 years old and they don't want to die going into, like, an active shooter situation or something, don't sit there and tell them, oh, you signed up to die for this job. Don't do it. Yeah. If you want to make that decision for yourself, fine. But we need to be supporting each other, but especially those new to the field who are wanting to learn. End of call review. You should be doing an end of call review after pretty much any call, because even basic calls, like, hey, you talk to this patient like you're a little bitch. Like, I know you're tired, but get over it. Bitch on the way to the call, bitch going away from the call, but let's not talk to them like that. Like, there's probably something that you could always talk about. And if at the end of the call it's, hey, there's nothing else we can fix, cool. At least you had open communication about fears for scene safety and patient care. So, if you learned anything, good. Tell your friends about it. If you were offended, good. You probably needed to be. And we'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.